act like he never left. Museveni's son, General Muhoozi, is now army chief after his promotion coming at a time the veteran leader is going for 7th term. Question is standby generator now on or off? That's a proper question, right? Is it meant to be a riddle? And Farah Malim was mulling over it, and Professor Mashara Munene as well. Let's see if they're still buffering or now it has downloaded and they can deliver it for us as well. Professor Mashara, let's begin with Professor Farah Malim.
Yeah, I mean, our guess is that he's being groomed for the presidency of the country. Whether he can pull it off, I think by far better than many who tried to groom their children or their wives, like without preparing them for them. I think he has gone through military trainings, he's gone through many institutions. I mean, he's up to the task. The only thing that's not going very well for him is that they will want to say that we don't want a dynasty. Other than that, I would not be surprised if he becomes the next president because, and I would not be surprised also if he does very well as the president of Uganda.
You know, going also by the recent spate of things happening around, when you're given the chief of command position. Commander-in-chief, yeah. Commander-in-chief.
No, Commander-in-chief is Museveni himself.
Chief of Army, sorry,
yes,
Chief of Army. Yes, I mean, that really also is very indicative of what
yes. I am told
is up the clock to sleep.
I would want to be corrected, but the impression I get from a number of people, and you probably have a similar insights into that, is he's very popular in the military, I'm told. Is that he's extremely popular with officers and servicemen, the rank and file, which means he was he lives a double life. I mean, he will want to mix up with all the big wigs, but at the same time, extremely humble and down to earth when he gets to his own officers there and forces there. I mean, if that is true, if that is true, then I think he's seriously prepared for that. And let me tell you one other thing. Museveni never lost an election. All the times that when an election was out there, you have people of Uganda want him back. Not for any other reason, but just two reasons. One, he doesn't go to business. He doesn't want to become a billionaire like we've had it in our case here in the past. You get my point? The only thing he cares about is his big-horned cows.
The cows.
The cows. And basically, he's not in business. And to that extent, corruption is pretty much very much more reduced than we have it in Kenya here. So they're able to, Ugandans are able to go about their businesses, they're able to go about their education and every area. They think generally they're doing well. And he doesn't, the only thing is that the country never had peace before he went in there. But it's now had relative peace for how many years? Almost 50 years now? Yeah. Close to? From 86 to today? About 40 years. About 38 years. So, I mean, nothing will surprise me to that extent. If they decide now to go again for Muhoozi and say we just want, let him run again the place. In any case, there's oil that is found in Hoima. And that oil is coming out. And if the oil comes out and the Ugandans are able to become a very rich country without the money finding itself into
some pockets,
private pockets and private accounts, which is by and large the tradition of Museveni himself. I mean, he doesn't go digging his hand into the national treasury.
Thank you.
But then, of course, I think they will have, in any case, it's just the same as the Gulf Arabs, you know what I mean?
Yes.
The Gulf Arabs are extremely rich, but because the people are also rich, nobody complains.
Right. We have, Kagonja, if you may remember this also a cartoon that we had earlier of Muhoozi himself. And we want to question why he went off the scene. Was he to do some growing up a bit? Yeah, he was called the tweeting general of Uganda. And we saw, he's still in diapers, and you see he soiled his diapers many a times. We can see him swearing in General Muhoozi Jr. This is just a depiction that we had. Make sure you clean him up good after the ceremony so he can take some photos to post online. This is, and you can see him holding the black label there, right?
He also is close to his bottle, eh?
Yes.
Yeah. So there's a black, black label.
He enjoys the bottle.
He really enjoys the bottle.
Oh my God! That now is another thing.
Yeah. So.
But the father doesn't drink at all, eh?
And then we have also this as well. M7 Junior for President 2026. And he's amidst other...
He's in a baby, what do you call trolley? What do you call this thing? No, what do you call baby walker.
He's a baby
he's
walker.
In a baby walker.
Yes.
Oh my God, and a lot of bottles around.
Right.
That is dangerous.
So the question is, does he have what he really passes muster for him to hold that particular office? Given that this indication that
he enjoys his drink.
He's frolicking like a child. Let me hear from Hanenje.
General Muhoozi Kainerugaba makes this region very interesting. At least he brings humor to a rather sometimes somber moods because of what is happening.
Just to remind you, remember also when he tweeted that they're intending to take over, was it Westlands?
Yes.
Kileleshwa.
Yes, yeah. No, he's welcome to come to Kileleshwa. I think his father once lived around Riverside, years back, so he must be very familiar with the
light touch.
Yeah.
He knows the neighborhood.
So he'd be coming back to his childhood neighborhood. So it is perfectly fine. I don't think General Muhoozi meant it that he actually wants to invade Kenya or anything like that. I think we are creating a mountain out of an anthill, which we shouldn't. It is true. The generals appears, at least from what sources, say, to be fairly, popular with some guys in the uniform, back at home.
Yes.
And as Professor Kagwanja mentioned in the morning, NRM has no peer. The movement has no peer. You see, it is true that perhaps there hasn't been a fair playing field when it comes to elections in Uganda, but there hasn't been a candidate who is actually strong enough to provide an alternative for Uganda. I was there during the time of the election, and a lot of young people were very inspired by Bobi Wine. But a lot of them at the same time, I asked them, so are you going to be voting for Bobi Wine? They say, but no, he doesn't look like he can become president. We like him, but he just does not seem to be mature enough to be president. He doesn't have to. He doesn't. They understand some of the dynamics. So the fact that they are attracted to him, it didn't translate into the votes. And so one of the things we see is that the next successor of President Museveni is most likely going to come from NRM. And among those ranks, of course, Muhoozi is one of the favorites. Prior to the assumption to office by Abiy Ahmed, we was on CGT and we were discussing, who we thought was the potential persons going to take over. And based on the party structure, remember saying, I think most likely is going to be Abiy Ahmed. Now you look at the way the country is structured, and you can have a prediction who's going to be. Now, we've first made fun of him a lot of it because of his outbursts, which sometimes come across as immature, and that is why there's that depiction of him in diapers. But compared to Donald Trump, I think he's probably more of a teenager than an infant, because Donald Trump, I think, does even worse things, than General Kainerugaba. And Donald Trump, for all intents and purposes, he may be the next president again for the second time of the United States. So perhaps we shouldn't be too harsh to General Muhoozi, who is actually said probably to succeed President Museveni. There's a likelihood that President Museveni may run or may decide perhaps to just exit by succeeding himself through his son. And in the absence of any formidable alternative to President Museveni that can offer clear vision for Uganda, we may have President Muhoozi for the next, for another maybe 10, 15 years, or whatever that is going to take. And considering that Uganda has been on a fairly good economic trajectory, our country that is probably the greenest in the region and that is producing plenty, with the new discoveries of oil and other resources, he may have enough in the bank to run the country.
All right. Right. I think we commented on this earlier with you, Peter Kagwenja. We don't need to belabor the point.
No, what I think we need to fresh up. You asked a question randomly. I think we can now be a little bit more systematic. if it's okay. Now, I think we've said the following, that Museveni does not believe in this Western liberal democracy because he's a person who went through very difficult times, being a Bantu in Uganda against the time they were calling the Northerners. And therefore, Muhoozi himself was born in Tanzania by a mother who was in exile in Norway and a father who was hopping from Tanzania to Mozambique to train and start preparing for the liberation of Uganda. So this is the background we're talking about. And Museveni, as a freedom fighter and a guerrilla, knew he could die any time. And according to his culture, the Banyankore culture, as a clansman, you are supposed to be avenged by your kith and kin. And therefore he called his son Muhoozi, meaning my avenger, the one who will avenge for me, the one who, if you do injustice to me, including getting rid of me, you'll get your equal measure from this young man. So from the beginning, Museveni brought up Muhoozi as an avenger and has trained him to be a good avenger. Now, I remember when we were discussing the general in diapers, it was interesting because that time we were speaking from a nationalistic point of view because he was threatening to take over Westlands in his tweets and so on. But if you look at the general, generally from a broader canvas, you get to know that he's not just a joker. He has his money on the on the box, and look at what he has supported globally. His global perspective is very clear. When the war in Ukraine came up, he supported Putin and said this invasion is fair and just, that Russia has the right to defend itself. When Donald Trump rose up and became a candidate, before he was elected, Muhoozi came up and said that this is the most sensible white person I've ever come across. He'll be elected. This is the kind of a person we're talking about. And you can go on giving the examples of what he has, in the positions he has taken globally on matters, including, Israel, Gaza, and all. He has always been, what you can call the radical Pan-African or the core Pan-African position that others are ashamed of talking about.
Thank you.
And I think the father gave him a chance. It's important to underscore this, to build his career outside the military. He's the only person who has led the Ugandan military in Congo. The whole Ugandan operation in the Great Lakes region is by Muhoozi, and he led the military himself, not by somebody else.
He was there in the bush. He was there
himself.
Yeah.
So he's not only prepared to be the chief of NRA, the National Resistance Army, he's also prepared to be the chief of the National Resistance Movement. And that is what makes Uganda. And it has no equal anywhere in this region. Not in Uganda. NRM, NRA, that combination has no equal anywhere else on the African continent. That's why it is very, very difficult to imagine that Uganda can be there without Museveni, or there without Muhoozi, or there without the NRM as a movement. Because it was simply prepared to stabilize Uganda on a long-term basis after the situation, the conditions they went through, and the successful unstable regimes. So begin to prepare yourself for Muhoozi.
Right.
Yeah, as not just the next leader for Uganda, but the person who is going to turn the politics of this region in a way that's fundamental. Why do I say so? The Ugandan military is in Mogadishu. The Ugandan military is in Juba, South Sudan. The Ugandan military, in one way or another, is in the Congo. The Ugandan military is in Rwanda because Kagame was part of that military. He hails from that as the chief of intelligence of that military.
Rwanda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Rwanda.
Kagame, yes.
Yeah, Kagame.
Chief of intelligence.
And Museveni, if you wish, is the heir to Nyerere. If you read Nyerere's will, he's the heir to Nyerere. So what are we talking about?
Mashari.
Yeah.
Professor, from you. Yes.
If anyone is prepared by training and experience to become president before he's elected, he's Moses.
Yes.
He's a prince, and so Museveni has been training his son to inherit, and has had the best exposure of everything in terms of governance, in terms of the defense. So it will not be surprising if he becomes president and accepted if the military love him because he's one of them. It's almost like the way Napoleon used to behave, that the foot soldiers love you all more than anything else. So it will not be a surprise if he becomes president and be maybe the best prepared person. No other leader has prepared his children that way to inherit it. I think others may be thinking about it, but Museveni has already done it. So it will not be. Kabila, of course, I don't think Kabila was that well prepared by his father when he became president. So it will not be a surprise, it's expected. Whether he will last after that is another matter. There is always, you get to the position of power, and then you have the stamina to continue being, or somebody else will find a way of persuading you to get out of the way, and then they get in. Because that is also a possibility. The phenomenon of the Bobby wine, I think the Ugandans like their wine, but nothing. So it's a phenomenon. There's entertainment.
They love the waragi.
Waragi.
So Museveni is entrenched.
It's not illicit.
This G.
Waraji.
Yeah. So even if Museveni leaves, it is clear that Muhonzi will take over.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Faramalim, let's just move on. I think we've had a good wrap on it. It's a developing story. I just wanted to get the latest development also on Haiti mission, where an American diplomat has made controversial claims about President William Ruto, who was moved to head the UN-backed mission to restore peace in Haiti. In an interview with CNN, Daniel Lewis-Foote, who was the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti from July to September, said that the Kenyan president was after the money the UN is expected to inject into the mission. Foote claimed that the Haiti mission was no walk in the park, and that the well-organized gangs that overthrew the government will fight the Kenyan police to death. He said, quote unquote, you see, the reticence on the part of the Kenyan public to send these guys, and that makes me nervous. I believe that this is more of a cash grab by President Ruto, whose country is going to receive a lot of money in doing this. Mr. Foote, in an interview with CNN, continued, and he was the U.S. Special Envoy to Haiti from July to September. And also he said that the Kenyan president was after the money the UN is expected to inject into the mission. And we have President John Biden administration had promised to inject 13 billion shillings to support the multinational, $13 million, I should say, to support the multinational force. Right, let's just begin with you, Dr. Kanenje. What do you think about that particular statement from the former envoy?
Well, of course, I think what the envoy, and I think he's been doing a series of interviews. For some reason, he seems to be very keen on discussing, this upcoming deployment. Now, what I would agree with him is that Haiti is not a very easy place. I think the challenge I've had, especially with his characterization, about dismissing Kenya as a third world country. I don't use those kind of terminologies because they are politically created by Truman in the aftermath of the Second World War. That because of that we cannot do anything. Well, there are many countries that have had successful missions if they are sufficiently backed, by the international community. And so that should not be a reason why we should not succeed. I think the question, of course, he raises now about the viability of the mission and potential success is that this is a theater, that is very, very difficult. But I think he's also speaking to the reluctance of the U.S. House to approve additional monies, which is going to make things complicated. Now, for us, as a country, I don't think $100 million will actually inspire us to go, unless now he's trying to characterize the president's decision from personal terms. Now, I don't know whether they have a personal relationship, but the $100 million or $200 million is really not that much money, even to Kenya. It's not. So that I will not buy it as a reason why we're actually going to Haiti. It is minimizing our agency and literally madarau kind of characterization.
But the last time we checked, also there was a discussion in the Congress regarding
but the
upping
concern,
the ante as far as the money is concerned.
The concern, and this is something personally I think I've expressed on this on this program, is that the partners who are working with Kenya, they have not committed sufficient amount of money, and to the extent that Congress would even block, the passage of another extra $40 million, which is actually very little money if you look at it, considering what, of course, the State Department, the Pentagon, or even EU partners give to other countries such as Ukraine today. And I think for Kenya, I've stated this, peace diplomacy is part of our foreign policy, so it is not something that is going against our common practice. The question is, do we have the right environment to be able to be successful? Can we be able to attract sufficient commitments to ensure that it's successful? Are there going to be political changes necessary internally to create a degree of legitimacy? So, of course, our men and women in uniform are not seen as occupiers or as a group that is working on the behest of another country. This is important, so even as we deploy, that we have this in mind.
Right, thank you. Very briefly on it. It's you. Oh, I've passed you. Oh, sorry.
Even when you're calling.
No.
It's a circle. The circle is ending with you.
Yeah, the circle, I think it begins with him. It comes to him. No, the way you came.
No, the circle.
Anyway,
I go with the sequence that you've arrived in the studio.
Kagwanja, I know Professor Kagwanja. Let me now tell you about this. I want to subscribe more to what Dr. Hassan has alluded to. I think he didn't expound on it very much.
I didn't get enough time. It's okay.
Haiti has a very special place in the history of the black man in this continent. Haiti was the first people who stood up against a mighty world power, defeated them, and then through that revolution, also liberated all the rest of the Southern American states. And I mentioned his name the other day. The person they credit with the father of Latin America,
Simón Bolívar.
Simón Bolívar came in as a 22 years old young man and came to Haiti. That's where he was trained. That's where he was ideologically indoctrinated. That's where he was given the military training. That's where he got the first support to go out there and liberate the rest of the continent. With one condition: every country that you liberate, you free the slaves immediately. Part of Brazil, Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, name it. I think what these people think is that we're going to go there with guns blazing and shooting what you call gangs, the rest of it, no. As he puts it, diplomacy is more important than anything else. We better start engaging them from the beginning and tell them, look, The West doesn't care about you. The Americans don't care about you. They even bet you in $40 million, but they can give $100 million or $200 million to Ukraine because you're blacks. They're racists. I don't care about you. We care about you as your fellow blacks. How can we bring this back to sense and bring in all the people, the barbecues and how many are they? And all of them, bring them on the table, discuss with them, and let's see if we can have an African, a black man's agenda to bring Haiti back to some kind of a glory. And I think so that's a beginning. We're not looking at it from the American perspective. We're looking at it from Haiti itself being a place that we feel a blood kinship, and we want to solve their problems because they've suffered too long.
Thank you.
Now, to that extent, and then taking it to the East African community, taking it to IGAD, taking it to the African Union, you get my point, and then taking it to the ACP-EU. What do you call it? African, Caribbean, Pacific, and the EU.
Yes.
So you can bring also the Pacific, and also bringing in people like the Russians on board. I don't care what the Americans feel about it.
Right.
Because they don't want, the Americans don't want the problems of Haiti to be solved. They want Haiti to remain the way it is forever. Even when they tried to come in, they were coming in with their own conditions. No American president can be very fair. No black man who defeated a white man can ever be loved by look at the Somalis. I mean, because of the debacle they suffered in Mogadishu and the traditional history that they've had, the British had with the Mad Mullah, what they call the Mad Mullah, or the dervishes and the rest. They've never loved Somalis. You know what I mean? And they will never care about anything good coming out of that. And as you put it, the Ugandans are there, Kenyans are there. They're not there because they have a strength of force. They're there through diplomacy. That military there, if the Somalis don't want them to stay with them, they get rid of them in less than 2 days. But the reason why they're there is that because the Somalis are happy with them as fellow Africans who have come to help them solve their own problems. Let's try and see if we can get a similar kind of a mentality on the Haiti issue. I'm not sure the Americans will come on board, or most of the Western countries will come on board, but I think that's a starting point for us.
Fantastic. I think we've actually been talking about this issue for the longest time, so we don't want to really go to the nitty-gritty about it and the history of it as well. It's just the development of what Daniel Foot was saying. If I may hear from you, Mashari, just a one-liner so that we can save time also
it's
for
interesting
other
what
issues.
Ambassador Foot said.
It's not genuine.
An accusation that the president was induced with some money. That's what he's saying. That the president is doing this for personal gain. Now, if that is the accusation, can he provide a little more substance to that accusation? Because if it is true, then it's very serious.
It's not.
If it is true that the president has sold out the country for a little money. On the Haitians, the approach, I think diplomacy is the issue, but it's not public diplomacy. Maybe some polite way of reaching out and not announcing every. So you say, I talked to so-and-so and announce it, it doesn't work. So if the decision has been made to go, then the approach is the issue. Because the going is no longer an issue. So how do you go about it? And you cannot go there carrying big guns and rungus and expect things to happen. So it's an approach thing that has to be looked into very carefully. And because we don't want our boys and girls going there and coming back in bags. But if you are going, then the approach has to be very carefully thought. And it's a long-term project, not a one-time thing. I think an educational component is necessary in the whole thing. And then the people who are promising to do everything do not appear to be interested in doing anything. They promise a lot of money, and they are cutting off the little thing, 40 million. So there is some disconnect somewhere. So they need to iron out these things.
Right. Peter Kagonja, briefly.
I think the case of Haiti has been described as a failed state. And
just the sentiment of the ambassador.
Definitely, and I think there's no doubt about this. The question is why Haiti failed. And who
failed it?
Yeah, did Haiti jump or it was pushed? This is a big question. And I think the answer is that Haiti has been pushed. It's a bad example that you have said for the Westerners. long before the British embarked on the so-called anti-slave trade campaign by William Wilberforce and others, Haiti had already liberated itself from the French.
Absolutely.
And therefore, it became a bad example of the countries. And then it was not satisfied. It was able to export its revolution to other parts of the world.
Which it did. Yeah.
And it did with total success.
Yeah.
And there are numerous examples about how and why it succeeded. Remember, the leader of the Haiti revolution was not just anybody. He was a general in Napoleon's army.
Yes.
And one of the most successful and accomplished generals in Toussaint. General Toussaint was no joke, very brave. Now, so back to the statement by Ambassador Hood.
Foot.
Yes.
There's an E at the end.
Yes.
So it's not
Is it 40?
It's 40, if you
not
say.
40.
But the ambassador, the white people are prone to make all manner of statements. And I think the big question is whether you give credence to what they say, or you behave in a manner that does not call for those kind of statements. I think on the Kenyan side, where we are becoming susceptible to these kind of racist statements, that we cannot be humanitarian, we can only be out for money grab. Why that statement is coming about is that the things are not adding up. Kenya is literally putting a square peg on a round hole. Full stop. Because Kenya is a square peg, Haiti is a round hole. How you put them there is difficult. Why do I say so fast? America has intervened in this country for very many times, has imposed dictators in this country, including the Duvaliers, both the father and the son.
Baby Doc and Papa Doc.
Papa Doc and Baby Doc. He has imposed them. Why is America not willing to go in now and stabilize Haiti, and has to come to Kenya and ask that we lead the UN force? And not only that, we also contribute our soldiers. Why us? And that is a big question, because there are other countries. And then when you look at which other countries the UN is going for, Mali, Benin, Chad, they are all in chaos. In fact, most of them have been outrode by the African Union because of the coups we've been talking about. So what is the whole idea here? You want to take to Haiti people, people from countries that when they die and come in body bags, there is no accountability. So it's a moral issue. And we have said here before that Haiti is a meat grinder. Haiti is a deep cesspool of death, because the Haitians don't think their state has failed, and if they do, they blame external intervention. So the ideological divide in Haiti is very clear. It is us versus them, us being the nationalists and them being imperialists. How is Kenya being characterized by the Haitians? And therefore, what kind of reaction are we liberators or colonizers in Haiti? These are ideological questions. And before you intervene, like for example, when we intervened in Somalia with the KDF, we had to be sure that Farah Maalim was the speaker of the day. The minister for security was Muse Haji, and the head of the Foreign Service Committee was Adan Kainan.
The optics.
Yeah, the optics are right.
Very important.
And because Kenya is not invading, Kenya is defending its nationalism. And Farah Maalim is a Kenyan, Yusuf Haji is a Kenyan, Adan Kainan is a Kenyan. So what are we doing in Haiti? We know the props.
All right. Now, relations between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. If you may roll the auto cue for me, please. Relations between President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sank to a wartime low on Monday, with the U.S. allowing passage of a Gaza ceasefire resolution at the United Nations and drawing a sharp rebuke from the Israeli leader. Netanyahu abruptly scrapped a visit to Washington this week by a senior delegation to discuss Israel's threatened offensive in the southern Gaza city of Rafah after the U.S. abstained in a Security Council vote that demanded an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas and the release of all hostages held by the Palestinian militants. The suspension of that meeting puts a major new obstacle in the way of efforts by the U.S. Concerned about a deepening humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza to get Netanyahu to consider alternatives to a ground invasion of Rafah, the last relatively safe haven for Palestinian civilians. The threat of such an offensive has increased tensions between long-term allies, the United States and Israel, and raised questions about whether the U.S. might restrict military aid if Netanyahu defies Biden and presses ahead anyway. We gravitate to begin with and also single as well, and also to look at the latest development. That is what bit of a statement was saying, and we just want to look at that as well. And the latest copy of The Economist is holding this splash: Israel alone. If we may just pick it up so that you can see, this is what is Israel truly alone? That is the latest publication from The Economist. And we want to begin with you, Dr. Kanenja, with this latest development. So what does this really portend, especially with the vote and now the rift that is growing wide between Biden and Netanyahu?
The rift is growing wide because the Biden administration is naive and has been naive for a very long time. Remember, in the immediate aftermath of the Israeli, or rather the beginning of Israeli offensive, the United States not only supported the Israeli actions, supplied, tens, if not hundreds of thousands worth of weapons and ammunition and bombs that are being dropped on Gaza, and at the same time you want to drop aid as you're dropping bombs. Now, the challenge has come when Democrats have realized that the rug is being pulled under their feet, especially when it comes to elections, as demonstrated in these primaries, where hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have been voting non-committal in the Democratic primaries, pointing to a possibility that they're going to be swept in November. A lot of those congressmen need to protect their seats. Last week, the highest-ranking Democrat in Senate, who is also the highest-ranking Jewish politician in the Senate, Jack Schumer, is the one who stood on the floor and asked actually that it's time for Netanyahu to go. Ask for elections in Israel so that Netanyahu can go, because it's become an obstacle to finding a solution. What has happened in Gaza makes it virtually impossible. There is no part on earth that has been bombed and flattened the way Gaza has been done since Nagasaki and Hiroshima. What has happened is actually genocide of the highest order. And to the extent that this is even a debate, it has left a stain, again I say this, on the collective West in ways that is not going to go away anytime soon. And unless there is a paradigm shift, because I do not see the strategic alliance between Tel Aviv and Washington changing, it's not just going to go away, But to the extent that the collective West has tolerated this massacre is the highest demonstration of global apartheid. How can we believe in human rights anymore? How can we believe that democracy can allow people to actually live in peace? When you, on one hand, you supporting the worst atrocities you can imagine in recent history, on the other side, you're trying to preach democracy. It is one of the challenges and contradictions that is going to fundamentally change the faith of the global South that they've had, especially in liberal ideas, and a lot of us who've been inspired and trained and socialized in liberal ideas. It becomes a challenge to look especially to whether it's in Brussels or London or Washington for that. And that is going to affect their diplomatic influence, is going to affect the ability to be able to preach the message about a free world. And something needs to be done today, because what is happening in Gaza is a stain on humankind.
Mm-hmm. Professor Kagwanja, yes, Macharia.
There are two desperate men here. One is called Netanyahu, and the other one is called Biden. And so what you see the rift here is because they are desperate. Netanyahu is trying to survive as Prime Minister of Israel.
Biden as president.
And Biden is trying to survive as
Prime
president.
Minister.
And their policies have not been doing them a favor. There is a rebellion in the United States against Biden, partly because of his behavior in Gaza. That's part of the reason. There is a rebellion against him. And,
So it's to salvage his
yeah,
political...
it's a survival thing, it's political survival. And Netanyahu, part of the reason he tolerated what happened was the political survival. So that he can,
Already this is bringing a rift in the coalition
Yes.
in Israel.
in fact, if there is an election held in Israel today, Netanyahu would have a lot of problems. And so you need to, remember he tried to come up with changing the laws about
Yes.
the court.
Supreme Court.
The Supreme Court, and that's why you had all those demonstrations against him. And so the episode in Gaza seemed to do him a favor by diverting attention from domestic problems. And so what these two were doing, they worked together very well for a while. Now the whole world has gone against them. They have said you cannot do this, and so they start fighting themselves. And that's what you see here. But ideally, they will still continue to be attached, but they have to survive.
You know, we complain that we have to free ourselves from neo-colonialism. I'm talking about the African continent. You come to realize with time that the Western political class are actually under what you call the Jewish lobby neo-colonialism. They are told what to do by the Jewish lobbies, and the Jewish lobbies are so powerful, so very powerful, that you will see a politician because of the fundings. I don't know if you've read that, these things. I mean, there's a whole big medical articles on that, that they fund literally every politician in the United States of America. They do the same also in the UK and all of the so-called Western developed world. So I think time now has come in which even those politicians are saying enough is enough. And the masses, because they're saying enough is enough, because the masses have woken up to the fact that we are under a Jewish, what do you call, colony. Because what they're doing and they're saying will do it with impunity. And you know, have you seen Jews threatening Russia and saying, you will see what will come to you. We will take on you. They threaten America. Netanyahu himself one time went on record as saying that no American politician can oppose us. We're so powerful. So whenever power becomes too powerful, then you have the arrogance of power. And that's exactly what happened in the run-up to the Holocaust in those days, where they controlled the entire business and industry and the rest of it. And they could decide to put the world into a war, and at the same decide who's going to win. I don't know if you know the first prime minister, the first president of Israel was a professor in Manchester University, Weizmann. Weizmann. He invented something that was a butyl, some mixture.
He was a chemist.
A chemist. Yeah. And that was what was used by the Allied forces, also the British, in winning the war in the First World War. Where he said, I'm not going to give it to you until you accept to create a state for Israel, for Jews. And that was used against. That was the reason why the Balfour Declaration came into force. Balfour Declaration came into force in 1917. And the war started in 1914. And it's because of those, what they call explosives and that invention, that the Allied forces and the British, for that matter, won against the Germans. Now the Germans grew up with that rage. That's why Hitler decided, I'm going to exterminate them all. Because they sabotaged the industrial complex of the Ruhr Valley, which was controlled by Jews at that time. Today we have an arrogance of a level similar to that one in the world, where the Jews are saying, nobody can oppose us. You try to do that, we'll destroy you. If you're a president, we'll get rid of you. Because we control the media, we control the money, we control the resources, we control everything. Global media. And I think increasingly the masses are beginning to say, wait a minute, we're not free. And if these politicians are not going to say, talk to any politician right now about Gaza, they'll tell you, bring back what they call the hostages. I mean, how do you equate 30,000, 40,000 dead against 100 and something hostages who are alive. You get my point? Because that is the narrative that are given to them by the Jewish lobby. And you know, for whatever it is, whether it's by accident or whatever it is, there was the 2002 global conference in which it was decided that Zionism was equated with racism.
Yes.
It was equated with racism because Zionists basically believe that everybody else is there for their own. I mean, they're the chosen people of God, and that people have got to serve them for them to. So what they're doing right now in Gaza, and they're doing it anywhere else in the world, according to them, is wrong. What is going to happen is that, let me just finish. Biden has woken up to the fact that he has lost the base. He's going to lose the elections. There's nothing that can be done about it. So he has to run to try and pull back on the traditional base of the Democratic Party. Of course, he's got about 7 or 8 months. And he thinks that he can play that for that period.
Thank you.
But before that, he went wrong.
Thank you. Let's leave it at that, Farah. I know we can talk and wax lyrical on what is really happening right now, but because of interest of time, and this is a developing story, we can pick it up next week. I'll just give headline thoughts to you, also, Professor Kagwanja, just briefly.
Very quickly.
Your headline thoughts?
I think the picture that's coming from this discussion is that there is a homogeneous Jewish opinion, and there is if you wish,
Zionist opinion.
A war room.
A Zionist opinion.
There's
a difference between Jewish and Zionism.
Oh, that's fine.
I have no problem with the Jewish.
Somewhere, and that there's also a war room which is now planning whichever this is and all. But let me say this.
Briefly.
If there is an issue that
we are winding up.
Yes, that's true. If there is an issue that has divided the Zionists and the Jewish community,
Jews.
Generally,
Jews.
we are talking about the Jewish opinion as we know it.
Yes.
It is the issue of Gaza.
Yes, I know.
Now, everybody agreed, including ourselves here in our past forums, that what happened on October 7th was criminal, evil, and intolerable about the invasion by the Hamas. But the reaction and what it has caused.
Thank you.
The first party. Let me wind up.
No, I'm under pressure.
Okay.
I'm under pressure. Just give you headline thoughts. I mean, Israel, this war is still old. We can pick it up next week.
What would you do if you
Thank you,
under
Farah.
70 years of occupation? What happened if you condemn what happened on October 7th? What would you do yourself if you are under those kind of 70 years of what you call slavery?
So the point is, opinion in America is sharply divided. And it is making politics in the United States very unpredictable.
Yeah.
Now, opinion in Israel is divided. Opinion in the Arab world is divided. Even those countries that were backing Israel are now silent and quiet.
Thank you.
And therefore, the politics is in a state of flux, and what Biden is doing and what Netanyahu are doing is simply an attempt, as Bajaria put it, to stay afloat.
Thank you.
In a situation where they are sinking.
Thank you.
So the world is changing very fast.
Yeah.
We've seen it changing in the Sahel area. We see what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. We've seen it wherever it's gone. The world is changing. So what we expected yesterday should be adjusted.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Farah, your one line.
The so-called imperialist, hegemonic, colonial, what do you call West that dominated the world for centuries is collapsing. That's the simple question.
Yes.
Simple position.
Thank you.
And it will manifest itself in many ways, including Gaza.
Thank you. All right. Dr. Kanyanja, closing remarks?
Yeah. What has happened on the continent and with the election of the new president, I think it's telling, but it's also inspiring, considering the kind of background he's come from. But it's also a reflection that the generation of that grew up in the post-Cold War era, I think is finally coming of age and is ready to take over leadership of the country.
Right. Gentlemen, I know there's a lot that we would have talked about, but because of time as well, we can just pick it up next week from where we've left. Thank you very much for your contribution. Really do appreciate Farah Maalim, also Dr. Hassan Kanenje, Professor Peter Kagwanja, and Professor Mashara Munene. Thank you for your input. Always a treat having you on Wednesday. We learn a lot. What really comes from your head off the script is really, really amazing. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. And I know it is exceedingly beneficial for many, especially who are keen followers of history and international relations as well, and diplomacy and all matter securities.